When you knit socks, you aren't just following a pattern, you are assigning meaning to each stitch. You're honoring human effort, holding back time, and preserving the simple, unchanging art of handwork. Thank you for being a part in this journey. May your socks carry warmth, tradition, and joy wherever they go. So this is the last and final sock knitting tutorial, and let me tell you, I really had a lot of fun making it. Today we will talk about how long to knit the foot before starting the wedge toe decreases, how to measure it correctly, and a little tip of mine, how to calculate the decrease round for your toe, and we will finish everything off with the Kitchener stitch. Before we can start the decrease rounds, we will first have to knit the foot. For this, you knit in stockinette stitch over needle 1, 2, 3, and 4 until you have reached a certain length. So when we look at our work here, we can see our heel, and when we divide this in the middle, you have on the left side your needle 1 and on the right side your needle 4. Place a stitch marker on needle 1. So I'm placing here my stitch marker in my last decrease round, because if I want, I can count my rows between my gusset and my wedge toe, and then I know for my second sock how many rows I have to knit in between my gusset decreases and before the wedge toe decreases, so that I always have identical socks. Because our feet are as unique as we are, it's important to customize our sock toes for the best possible fit. There are a lot of advices out there how long you need to knit your sock foot until you start your decreases. One of them is to knit to the end of your little toe and then start the decreases. Well, I don't find this is the best advice because it works for 50% of the knitters, but the other half will have too long or too short socks. So I drew a picture with 4 common foot shapes, each with different toe length and toe alignment. So if your big toe is the longest, you measure from the tip of your big toe until your foot starts to narrow. If your second toe is the longest, you measure from there. And if the toes are nearly the same, you want a rounder and roomier sock. This can be done by starting fewer decreases at the beginning and then working more decreases closer to the end. This method makes the toe section wider and roomier, preventing tightness and giving a better fit for this foot shape. You can also knit the foot until it measures about 4 or 5 centimeter lesser than the total foot length, and then you can start your decreases. In the calculation video, I also showed you how you can measure your foot length. This foot length is now needed in order to calculate everything we need to have the perfect fitted sock. So for my toe decreases, I know I have about 4 centimeters. I measured from the tip of my biggest toe to the point where my foot starts to narrow. So you can also go with 4 or 5 centimeters lesser than your total foot length. In my example, I will subtract 4 centimeters from my 25.5 centimeters. That leaves me with 21.5 centimeters for the main foot section. I will now multiply my 21.5 centimeters by 0.9, and this equals 19.5 centimeters. And this is the measurement for my sock unstretched. So the general formula is foot length before toe decreases multiplied by 0.9. You only need these calculations if you want to customize the fit of your sock toes. You can also simply knit the foot about 4 or 5 centimeters shorter than your actual foot length and then start with your decreases. I will add some timestamps so you can directly jump to them when you want. So when my sock lies flat on the table without being stretched, you can see that it measures around 19.5 centimeters. This would be about 7.7 inches. And when I gently stretch the sock, it easily measures up to 21.5 centimeters. This would be about 8.5 inches. So this is my favorite technique to find out how long I have to knit my foot, because this way I don't be in danger to overstretch it and have a wrong measurement and the sock ends up too short. Because when I put it on, I have exactly 4 centimeters left for my decreases. So, and now we are going to talk about how to calculate your wedge toe decreases. I have put together here a little sheet. You can screenshot it and then you always have it on your phone or by hand if you need it. If you don't have a row gauge, that's not a problem because you already have knitted a whole foot. Count how many rows you have in, for example, 5 centimeters and then double them, and then you have your row gauge for 10 centimeters. Then we need to multiply our desired toe length by our row gauge, and then we have to plan our decreases, and we will add plain rounds in between our decreases to shape our toe. For example, my sock has 52 stitches. I want a 4 centimeter toe. My row gauge is 3.8 rows per centimeters. So I will multiply my 4 centimeters with my 3.8 rows, and this will be about 15 rows in total. So most wedge toes are worked until about 1/3 of your starting stitches remain. This means I will divide my 52 stitches by 3, and this will be about 17 stitches. Each decrease round reduces 4 stitches, one on each needle. So to calculate how many decrease rounds we need, we have to calculate 52 minus 17 divided by 4. This will be about 9 decrease rounds. So to find out our plain rounds, we need our total rounds, which will be 15, and subtract the 9 decrease rounds. This will be 6 plain rounds. You can download this free sock knitting tracker on my blog. There you also find a chart where you can plan your decreases. For a more roomier sock, you can knit more plain rounds at the beginning in between the decreases and then decrease more to the end. Or you decrease like I did every other row. If you decided to skip the customization part, welcome back. So knit your foot until it reaches about 4 or 5 centimeters shorter than your actual foot length. So I will place a stitch marker to help me keep track of my rounds and rows. This stitch marker marks the beginning of my round, so my first needle, and also the end of my foot section. The wedge toe decreases will be worked over needle 1, 2, 3, and 4. Our stitch marker marks our needle 1, and from there we will knit clockwise and work our decreases. So if you skip the customization part for the wedge toe, you will work your decreases in every other round. So we will start our decreases on the first needle. On needle 1, we will knit to the last 3 stitches. When you knit the first 2 stitches on double pointed needle, pull your working yarn a little tighter to avoid leathering. I'm not going to speed up this section, so you can watch each step and feel confident as you maybe knit along with me. So when you reach the last 3 stitches, knit 2 together and then knit the last stitch. On needle 2, the decreases will be at the beginning. So, at the beginning of needle 2, knit the first stitch, and then work an SSK. This means slip one stitch knitwise, slip the second stitch knitwise, and then knit them together through the back loop. Then knit to the end of the needle. On needle 3, we will work again to the last 3 stitches. So knit all the stitches until 3 stitches are remaining on your needle. When you reach the last 3 stitches, knit 2 together and then knit the last stitch. So on needle 4, we will work our decreases at the beginning. So knit 1 stitch, then slip 1 stitch knitwise, slip the second stitch knitwise, and then knit them together through the back loop. Knit to the end of the needle. Now we reach the beginning of the row and have worked our first decrease round. So after each decrease round, knit 1 plain round. This means you knit all the stitches on needle 1, 2, 3 and 4 with no decreases. So after finishing your plain round, mark this at your chart and then we will continue with round 3. Round 3 will be a decrease round. If you did customize your socks and you have 2 or 3 plain rounds in between, knit these plain rounds in between your decreases first. So again, knit to the end of needle 1, knit 2 together, and then knit the last stitch. On needle 2, we will work the decreases at the beginning. So knit your first stitch and then work an SSK over the next 2 stitches. Knit to the end of needle 2. On needle 3, knit until 3 stitches are remaining. Work and knit 2 together. And then knit the last stitch. And on needle 4 we will decrease at the beginning. This means knit the first stitch and then work and slip, slip, knit, decrease. Knit to the end of needle 4. So now we are at the beginning of the round again and we did knit another decrease round. Our next round will be a plain round again. This means you knit over needle 1, 2, 3 and 4 with no decreases. So now we have reached the beginning of the round and we have finished round 4. Round 5 will be a decrease round again. Knit until 3 stitches are remaining. Then knit 2 together and knit the last stitch. On needle 2, the decreases will be at the beginning. So knit the first stitch and then work an SSK. Slip one stitch knitwise, slip the second stitch knitwise and then work them together through the back loop. Knit until the end of the needle. On needle 3, knit to the last 3 stitches. Knit 2 together. Knit the last stitch. And on needle 4, the decreases will be at the beginning. This means knit the first stitch and then work an SSK over the next 2 stitches. Knit to the end of the needle. When you reach the beginning of the round, you will knit a plain round again. Repeat these 2 rounds, alternating decreases and plain rounds until you have about 1/3 of your original stitches. So in case you skip the customization part, 1/3 of your stitches means you have to divide your total stitch count by 3, and this will give you the remaining stitches you need. On needle 1, work a knit 2 together and then knit 1 stitch over the last 3 stitches. On needle 2, work a knit 1 and then an SSK over the first 3 stitches. On needle 3, you will work again a knit 2 together decrease and a knit 1 over the last 3 stitches. And on needle 4, you will work a knit 1 and an SSK over the first 3 stitches. So I am now at my last decrease round and I want to work it with you together, because if your stitch count isn't exactly divisible by 3, you can work only 3, 4 or 1 decrease at the last round. For my example, here I will knit 2 decreases because I want to have 9 stitches on my sole stitches and 9 stitches on my instep stitches. So on my needle 1, I will work until 3 stitches are remaining and then I will knit 2 together and then knit the last stitch. Needle 1 and needle 4 will be my sole stitches, so I will check if I have 9 stitches in total. So when I count the stitches on needle 1 and 4, I have 9 stitches. And my needle 2 and my needle 3 will be my instep stitches, and I want to have the same number of stitches on that needle that I have on my sole needle. So I need to decrease 1 more stitch to have the same number of stitches on my sole needle and my instep needle. After finishing the decreases on needle 2, I will knit normally over needle 3 and needle 4 without decreases. Double check your stitch count to make sure you have the same number of stitches on both needles. And then I knit over needle 3. You can see here that the 2 needles at the back will build our sole stitches and the 2 needles at the front will be our instep stitches. Now I'm bringing or knitting all the stitches together. I'm knitting over my needle 4. So I don't need this needle anymore because I will knit the stitches from needle 1 together with the stitches which were on needle 4. And with this I have my yarn at the back. And I will slip the stitches from needle 2 and needle 3 together onto one needle. In order to work the Kitchener stitch, arrange all sole stitches onto one needle, typical needle 1 and needle 4, and place all the instep stitches onto a second needle, typical needle 2 and needle 3. So make sure that your working yarn is at the back needle. This will give you the perfect setup for the Kitchener stitch. This is what your wedge dough will look like when you finished all your decreases. It's so beautiful. Cut the yarn, leaving a tail about 3 times the width for your toe. I'm threading my working tail onto a blunt tapestry needle. So this means my tapestry needle doesn't have a sharp tip. I have here a blunt one, and for weaving in the ends we want a sharp sewing needle. So thread your yarn tail onto your blunt tapestry needle, and then we will work the setup stitches for our Kitchener stitch. This means on the front needle, insert your tapestry needle through the first stitch on the front needle as if to purl, from back to front. Pull the yarn through and leave the stitch on the needle. On the back needle, insert the tapestry needle through the first stitch on the back needle as if to knit. So from front to back. Pull the yarn through and leave the stitch on the needle. Give it a good tug, but without breaking the yarn. When we cut the yarn, the stitch on the back needle becomes a little bit looser, so to avoid any holes, pull a little on that working yarn so that everything is snug. On the front needle, insert your needle knitwise into the first stitch and pull it off the needle. And then insert your needle into the second stitch as if to purl and leave the stitch on the needle. Pull the working yarn through and give it a little tug. On the back needle, insert your needle purlwise into the first stitch and pull it off the needle. Insert your needle knitwise into the second stitch, pull the working yarn through and leave the stitch on the needle. It really looks like it as if I would aggressively pull on that yarn, but trust me, I'm not. I'm gently pulling on it. On the front needle, insert your needle knitwise into the first stitch and pull it off. Then insert your needle purlwise into the second stitch and leave the stitch on the needle. Give a gentle tug. On a back needle, insert your needle purlwise into the first stitch and slip it off the needle, and then insert your needle knitwise into the second stitch, pull the working yarn through and leave the stitch on the needle. Insert your needle through the first stitch on the front needle as if to knit and pull the stitch off the needle. Insert your needle through the second stitch as if to purl, pull the working yarn through and leave the stitch on the needle. Insert your needle through the first stitch on the back needle as if to purl, pull the stitch off, and then insert your needle knitwise through the second stitch and leave the stitch on. Front needle knit off, purl on, back needle purl off, knit on. Again, front needle knit off and purl on, back needle purl off, knit on. I will now work my last stitches. On the front needle I knit the first stitch off and purl the second stitch on, and on my back needle I will purl the first stitch off and knit the second stitch on. And now for the last stitch, knit the stitch off on the front needle and on the back needle purl the stitch off. Pull the working yarn through and make sure that everything is nice and snug. So now we are at our last step, finishing everything off and weaving in all ends. You can see here that everything looks really nice and seamless. So now we have to bring our yarn tail to the inside of our sock. I'm inserting it through my corner and then I'm turning my work around. Pull your working yarn through and make sure you don't pull on your working yarn, because if you do, you tighten up the Kitchener stitch. Now switch to a sharp sewing needle. This makes it so much easier to secure the yarn ends, especially when you are using a slippery yarn. Splitting the yarn with a sharp needle helps anchor the tail securely because it catches individual fibers or plies inside the knitted fabric. We will weave in our ends along the side of our sock. We will use all these little Oh my god. We will use all these small pearl bumps at the wrong side and we want to split them. So work with your sewing needle through all these little pearl bumps and make sure to split them as you go. You can work as many pearl bumps as you think you need to anchor your yarn. When you pull your working yarn through all the stitches, make sure to do it gently because if you pull aggressively on your working yarn, everything will tighten up and you don't want that. I will work a few more stitches down. And then I'm going to reverse it and sew back through the same area. But this time I'm catching both the yarn stitches and the tail we just wove in. This back and forth motion helps us lock the yarn in place and makes it less likely to come loose over time. So I'm going to sew my yarn tail one more time in the other direction, catching both the yarn tail and my purl stitches here. When you are finished, cut your yarn tail. I always leave a short yarn tail instead of cutting right next to my knitted fabric. That way I avoid accidentally snipping into my stitches, which happens to me once, and trust me, it was not fun. So this is what the Kitchener stitch looks from the right side. You can see here we have a really seamless join and it's a really nice finish for a sock. We still have the small gap at the cuff of your sock and we want to close this now. Turn your sock to the wrong side and grab your sharp sewing needle. I will remove the stitch marker here because I think it will get in the way. Thread your yarn tail onto the sharp sewing needle and make sure your wrong side is facing you. Bring your yarn thread from the left to the right side. We want to pick up the first stitch along the edge from the right side. Pick up your first stitch and thread your yarn tail through the stitch, but don't pull it tight yet. Next, bring the needle from the right to the left. So we will pick up the stitch that's directly under our first stitch from the right edge, and then we are searching for the connection on the left side. Pick up a stitch there and bring your yarn tail through both stitches, but don't pull it too tight. So look where there is still a gap and then bring your yarn from left. So insert your needle through a stitch on the left edge and through the stitch on the right edge and bring your yarn tail through both stitches. And I have still a little gap here at the connection where we close to the round and I also want to close this gap here. So I will thread my yarn tail one more time through this stitch here and the stitch that's to the left. So now that we have closed all our gaps, we can tighten up our stitch a little bit. To finish everything off, we will weave in the yarn tail back and forth through the ribbing stitches to anchor everything securely. When I'm weaving in my yarn tail, I like to use the legs from my knit stitches. First, I go through the left legs and then I go through the right legs. I carefully pick up each leg, but I also split them. And then I work my way down for several stitches. About 4 or 6 stitches should be enough to secure your yarn tail. I'm holding my sock in a way that you can see clearly what I'm doing. If I wouldn't make a tutorial, I would hold the sock um, upside down because this would be easier to catch every leg. When you're finished with picking up all the stitches, pull your working yarn through, but don't pull it tight. And then find the next column of stitches or the right leg from your knit stitch and work your way up. Insert your needle through the right leg and then work your way up. Make sure to split all your legs while you work your way up. I hope I don't get arrested. When you are happy, pull your working yarn through and work one more time in a reverse direction so that we can secure everything. When you weave in your yarn tail this way, we will keep the seam tidy, strong, and it helps prevent it from unraveling over time. It also blends really nice into the fabric and everything stays nice and stretchy. Here's the finished sock cuff from the wrong side and from the right side. We have closed all the gaps we have made at the beginning. You can see here the cuff is really nice and stretchy. And we have a beautiful transition between cuff and leg, a beautiful gusset pickup with no holes. And then we have worked our decreases and the Kitchener stitch. Thank you so much for joining me on this complete sock knitting journey. Creating this tutorial series has brought me so much joy and I truly hope you have lots of fun knitting your own pair of socks. If you have finished a pair of socks using these lessons, I would absolutely love to see your handiwork. Feel free to send me photos of your finished socks by email. And with your permission, I would be curating a knitter spotlight right here on my blog so everyone can admire and be inspired by your creations. Every pair of sock is special, whether it's your first attempt or your 100th. Thank you so much for all the time and trust you have given me by choosing to knit your first pair of socks along with me. I wish you all the best. Stay healthy. Until next time. Bye.